While retirement is generally seen as a time of relaxation and self-focus, God calls us to love, serve, and help others for a lifetime. He has been preparing us for this retirement season, literally our entire lives. In retirement, countless Christians enter a state of spiritual dormancy, not knowing how they are called to have an impact for God's kingdom. The Retirement Reformation seeks to encourage and empower the 50 million Christians approaching or in retirement to embrace the calling God has been preparing in them. When the world says it's time to stop, you can begin to have your greatest impact. Welcome to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, where our goal is to journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him.
Reaching out to you, one of 50 million Christ followers in America who are in retirement or approaching retirement. We want to help you embrace the calling God's been preparing for you for all of your life. You've tuned into I Retire for Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation right here in the United States of America. We're your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg, and we've got Bruce Bruinsma, the founder of the Retirement Reformation, with us today. We'd love for you to check us out online at retirementreformation.org. Martha, why don't we tell people about how they can get a copy of Charting Your Course and maybe some of the features of what's in there?
Well, I'm excited because today we're going to actually get to delve into a little bit of, getting out your pens and really making some progress in the area of figuring some things out for yourself. So Charting Your Course can be found on the website, retirementreformation.org. And one of the things that I love, the end of the book really gets into some tools and some space to really work out what you've been learning along the way. So if you've been listening to this podcast, if you've been engaging in, okay, Lord, what is it that you want for me? You're going to get some really practical next steps here. So checking out the Charting Your Course on the website, retirementreformation.org.
And they can get us on the contact page. We would love for you to go out to retirementreformation.org. Bruce Bruinsma, you provided a contact page. What would you like people to put when they contact us to try to get a paper copy of the Retirement Reformation? You'd like for them to share something.
Oh, we'd love to hear your stories because you are the stories of the Retirement Reformation. The Reformation isn't Bruce Bruinsma. It's not the Retirement I Retire for Him podcast. It's not any of the books. It's not any of the support materials. It's you and it's me and it's our interaction together. And to be able to provide that platform, and so one of them is on that contact page, to be able to give us a short version of your Retirement Reformation story so that we can be encouraged by how God is operating in your life as we are attempting to encourage you by how He is operating in ours.
And we've been trying to highlight some of those stories on each and every show. We love to just hear the stories. That's what the kingdom of God's all about. It's how we are interacting with our Heavenly Father. Bruce, I want to jump right into this. What do you want out of your retirement years?
Well, that's a really great question, and I think that's one that all of our listeners can respond to also. From my standpoint, starting at the highest level, when my work here is done, I want to stand before the Father and hear Him say, good and faithful servant. There's number one.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all want that for sure.
Secondly, I was a football player and enjoy sports. And so typically when there's been a great contest and they're interviewing one of the people in the contest and they say, well, tell me about that. And their comment is, I left it all on the field. There was nothing that I could have done that I didn't do. I did it all. I laid it out to the best of my ability, with its shortcomings and with its failures and everything else, but I left it all on the field. And then thirdly, as I've had a mantra for a large number of years, and to be able to evaluate for myself and to know that I in fact have loved God, that I have spread the word, and that I have encouraged others. So if good and faithful servant, left it all in the field, been true to the vision of myself that God has given me, that will be success. Now, I would also like to hear, as we pass through the pearly gates and we walk around the miles and miles of room in heaven, to be able to connect with people, and say, you encouraged me, and here's what happened. And then I'll be most excited when they say, and I took that, and here's what happened to others.
Absolutely. That's the impact. It's so incredible. So, Bruce, we want to talk about really understanding, achieving what we want in retirement. And so many of us, we chase after retirement as 30 years of vacation. We're going to here's all the list of things we are never going to do ever again. We're not going to put a tie on. Of course, people don't wear ties anymore, but we're not going to put a suit on anymore. No ties. We're not going to get dressed up. I don't have to put my makeup on first thing in the morning. And for me, that is a major effort. So there's always, a lot of times people start retirement with a list of things that they're never going to do again. But retirement is so much more than that, isn't it?
Well, as we've talked, for many of us, it is much clearer to us about where we've been and what we don't want to do. And often we're able to speak about that with great clarity, in great sincerity, in great passion. Now we need to translate that rear view mirror view to a front windshield view of where is it that we are going. And because we are so relieved about where we've been, we really don't take that time to reflect, to pause, to learn, to read, to understand, to refresh, for Pete's sake, so that we are in preparation for something that is ahead. And just simply the knowledge that there is more, just that change of mind is pivotal, that God has something more. That starts us on our own path of discovery to the answer to the question of, what does it look like for me?
So let's talk about life planning. So many retirees, we financially plan for retirement.
Hopefully,
yes. Not everybody does, and we know that's a whole nother topic for another day, right? So if you're listening and you haven't, now's your cue to work on that. But we don't talk as much about the financial spending plan or retirement life planning. So how can we get started on those things?
I think life planning, and we have talked about it, and we talk about it in the book, but I think it's important to reiterate. You got to know where you are. First, you got to know who you are. You got to know where you are, and then you got to know where you're going. And the answers to those questions fit into a category that we call life planning. You noticed it wasn't one of those three questions was how much money do I have,
right,
or do I have enough? Important questions, but that's not the place to start. Place to start is, who am I? What am I called to? Where am I going? How am I going to get there? Then what comes out of that is the natural question of, I'm going to need some resources. And so that's where financial planning comes in. So financial planning comes in as a result of the life planning, and then to be able to see in the resources, do I have enough? Am I properly prepared? If I'm not, what am I going to do? Now you have those operational questions, but the important ones are the life planning questions, because that's the spiritual dimension where we connect with God and where we find our deepest satisfaction.
And that's what I love about your book, Charting Your Course, because throughout the chapters, you give people an opportunity to just explore those passions and to do that life planning. And so it's great. We want you to get a copy of that book. Go out to retirementreformation.org. You're listening to I Retire for Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation. We'll be right back.
You've spent decades making financial plans for your retirement years. But have you done any life planning? God has a plan for your life, and it includes living out your faith in your retirement years with meaning, purpose, and intentionality. Go out to retirementreformation.org and click on our Resources tab. Download a copy of the book, Charting Your Course, and get started with life planning today. Simply download a copy of Charting Your Course at retirementreformation.org. Make the journey from retirement to reformation, so you can say, I retire for Him. Now let's get back to the show.
Hey, welcome back to I Retire for Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation. We are your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg. And today, Bruce Bruinsma, you've invited a guest to join us.
I have, Jim, and it's a very special guest. And his name is Tim Newell. Let me introduce our listeners to Tim. And Tim is the president of Harvest Investment Services. You might just notice the acronym of HIS, and that is actually pretty accurate. And so one of the things that I've been impressed with Tim and his work as a financial planner, as a wealth manager, and all the clients that he works with, is that starting about 6 months ago, as we were introduced, he discovered the book, The Retirement Reformation. And Tim, you have used that in conversations with your clients. So do two things for me. First of all, give our listeners just a little bit more of your background. And then secondly, how has that book impacted your work, your ministry?
Great. Thanks, Bruce, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this conversation today. It's a great conversation to have. So just a real brief thumbnail sketch of Tim Newell and Harvest. I've been doing this now for this being running a financial planning firm, a faith-based firm, for over 36 years. Several years ago, before I touch on that, we work with both individual clients, we work with business owners, and we help about 40 or so advisors around the country to do the same. We run this as a faith-based firm, and in doing that, we attempt to teach our clients and our advisors biblical concepts related to money, stewardship. We've taught for years that we've been entrusted with time, talent, and treasure, and that one day we will all give account for what we did with all three of those things. And so it's something that we've taught for years. Several years ago, I dug in a little deeper with the Kingdom Advisors organization and went and got my certified Kingdom Advisor designation. And I have to say that when I was going through the program, that my heart was stirred in a deeper way on this whole concept of being a good steward of not just of the assets that we've been entrusted with, but the talents and our abilities and our time. And so when I came across the book, and you, Bruce, and you introduced me to the whole concept of the Retirement Reformation, it really resonated with me. And we've been ordering these books by the dozens and giving them out to our clients and our advisors, and almost kind of in many ways making it required reading when we're sitting down with folks from that first appointment or even a review appointment when we're talking about somebody getting closer to whatever that age that they've been thinking about for retirement. And it's really kind of a strange business that we're in. We're in this retirement planning business, and yet we work with a high percentage of clients that are believers, and yet the Bible really doesn't say an awful lot about retirement, right? And really your book tells a story even better than I've ever been able to tell it, in that, we get to this point where people are planning to someday, jump out of their job or their business, and what they do to get paid for a living and get a paycheck a couple times a month, and they move into this concept called retirement. And it is strange to have that conversation with folks in a way where we've said, so what are you going to do after that? And what do you think God has called you to do with all of the talent that he's entrusted to you? Is that just supposed to sit on the shelf someplace now while you go out and play golf or fish or hunt or sit on the porch or whatever it is that retirement is defined by you in your book? And it's led to some incredibly moving conversations with folks. We've had folks really just coming back in after reading the book and kind of doing some personal retreat time as individuals or as a couple. And we talk about, when you're 80 years old, what do you want to be doing? And and just challenging them to really rethink the whole concept of retirement, and that I love the term that you've allowed us to use, future funded ministry, and the concept of that this bucket that we've always thought of a retirement plan is now really a future funded ministry bucket.
Well, that's I know some of the conversations that you've shared. Has it surprised you that this is almost a new concept when you're talking with them, not about retirement planning, which really deals with money, but life planning that deals with what does God have for them? Does it surprise you, or is that just because you've seen it so often and for so long? That's kind of where people are, and what we really need is a retirement reformation.
Yeah, I think that's a great. It's the $64 million question, I suppose. It's probably a lot more than that, because there's so much misunderstanding about the concept that we've taught in our culture about retirement, and we in the financial planning business are very guilty of only helping to further that problem, I think, in many ways. And helping them plan around some given date that they're going to just kind of hang it up and no longer do what they've been called to do. And I think it's just become part of our culture, Bruce, that we teach that, and it does require a whole reformation in the way that we think. We need our thinking in that it does need to be reformed, rethought, retooled, because it needs to start not when somebody's 65 and about to apply for their Social Security and their Medicare, but it needs to start years earlier, where they really start thinking that through. What has God called me to do? And even move into that mode even much sooner, and spend more of their years where they've got a sharp mind dedicated towards having an impact on the kingdom in ways that they've never even thought they could before.
Well, I think as we wind up this conversation, I think the heart of the message that you've shared is a couplefold. Number one, we need to start earlier. Number two, we need to be aware. Number three, we need to be intentional. And that God has that plan, and as we step into that, how wonderful that would be. I think between you and I, we would also agree that the financial planners in the country that are faith-based, that need to embrace this message and bring that to, and so that our listeners, one of the things, if you have a financial planner, to ask them to say, well, how is it that you can help me to match my values, my investments, and my life plan? And as we can pull those three together, I think we've got a wonderful way to go. So, Tim Newell, thank you so much for joining us today. Tim Newell, the president of Harvest Investment Services, and the experiences that he is having and is continuing to have with his clients as we bring to them the retirement reformation. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Bruce. God bless you, and the incredible work that you're doing to move the ball down the field in the kingdom. Thank you.
God bless.
You're listening to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation, and we'll be right back.
It's time we stop looking at our retirement years as 30 years of vacation, leisure, and self-gratification. Let's take control of our retirement life plan and build meaning, purpose, and intentionality into it. Go to retirementreformation.org and click on the word manifesto. We invite you to make a retirement declaration to yourself and to God. Sign the manifesto and start changing the way you think about retirement. Retirementreformation.org. Click on Manifesto. Journey from retirement to reformation, so you can say, I retire for Him. Now let's get back to the show.
Hey, welcome back to iRetire4Him. Really a fantastic conversation we're going on today, and what do you want in retirement, and how do you achieve what you want in retirement? So, Bruce, as you and Judy were preparing for retirement, what was the toughest question that you guys had to answer as a couple? Because this is a lot of years ago. Judy was a flight attendant until her late 60s. When you guys decided to retire, you decided not to retire. So what was the toughest question for you guys to ask?
Well, I think as many of our listeners know, the term retirement and the concept of it really is not in the Bible. However, the concept of understanding yourself, understanding your relationship with God, and planning was really critical. So that's one of the keys in the charting your course is the requirement to do some planning. But between the two of us, you can't plan unless you know what the other person's thinking about. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to have some real serious conversations about the transitions that are ahead, and we talk about that in charting your course, what some of those issues are. I would just say, just to pull one out of the air that is the most critical, is if you're in that pre-stage or in a stage where another stage is coming, mm-hmm.
One
of those points of transition, go out, pick one of these beautiful nights and go out for a walk and hold hands, and then turn to your spouse and say, well, what do you think we ought to do next? Mm-hmm. And simply begin the conversation.
And that's what, shut the TV off and just have a conversation. And maybe you need to get away from your house to this. Maybe you need to go on vacation. Maybe you need to rent a condo up in, you're from Colorado, Vail. You need a condo in Vail or Breckenridge for a week just to get away.
Well, it's interesting. In our marriage, it's been strange, and we don't quite understand it. Perhaps others have experienced it, is that we have our best conversations when we are not at home. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, if we want to have a really connected, good conversation, we go out for dinner. And it's over that dinner table that for some reason we have the freedom, I think, to be able to communicate in a way that we don't when we're sitting around in our own living room. I'm not sure why that's true, but for us, that's the signal. So if Judy says, hey, let's go out for dinner, I know that in addition to not wanting to cook, she's also saying, I think there's some things that we need to talk about. And so one of them, could be, again, where are we going to live in our next stage of life?
Right.
A critical question, and perhaps the number one question that both creates friction and an opportunity for mutual understanding, and would urge our listeners to all have that conversation, regardless of your age. Where are we going to live next?
Some great conversations to be had and to really be intentional about them. So, Bruce, Bruinsma is here with us as the founder of Retirement Reformation. And one of the things we set up at the beginning of this particular podcast was telling people that we're getting into a chapter of the book where there's actually some things to work out, some space to come up with some things that are personal in your own life. So let's talk about that. So if anybody was in business, they may have had to come up with a mission or a vision statement for their business. But you are suggesting having a mission or vision statement for your own life. How do we go about that, and how is the book helping?
One of the things that we realize is that for many of us, it's a new journey. We don't have any experience doing it. Some in business may have done with their strategic plans or whatever, but I think as a whole people, we're not very good at that. And so to be able to, what I tried to do in charting your course was very gently not to tell anybody what to do, but in fact to be able to bring perspective and bring opportunity for for each individual person to identify how their life and who they are with Christ, in their experiences that they've had, the passions that they have, to begin to find some gentle ways to express that and to write it down, to end up with a statement perhaps like, love God, spread the word, and encourage others, so that you've got something that's clear enough in your mind that all the next action steps can fit into. And then to be able to gently take steps of what is it that you're passionate about, and to give you some options, and to give you a whole list of kinds of things that you could be. So all of those are gentle steps that open the door provide white space for the Holy Spirit to work with you, and for you and then you and your spouse to be able to express those thoughts that are really yours, not somebody else's, but that are really yours.
So when you're quoting, love God, spread the word, and encourage others, is that what God has given you as a statement for your life?
Exactly.
So I'm thinking about this in practical terms, because that's the kind of person I am. And I think about different things that may happen in life that you weren't expecting. You can still live with that statement as a decision filter, as we've talked about. And right. I think about, people that maybe got to the end of quarantine and said, man, I wish I would have done things differently. Well, if you look at your mission statement and say, in this season, what should I be doing? Well, I can love God, spread the word, and encourage others. What's that going to look like right now? Or maybe I fall and break a hip and I'm in a rehab facility for a while. How can I do it? How can I live out my statement there? And so I love this idea because it can be that filter for anything that comes along that you may not be expecting that, but you know that this is what God's called you to do.
That's why God gives us his principles. That's why he gave the Israelites the 10 Commandments. That's why Jesus was so very clear about, what are your priorities? To love one another, love God, love one another, love your neighbor. So that we have those simple but often complex, easy tools to guide us in our thinking, so we have a place to go when something happens, whether it's unexpected or it's anticipated. Either way, we have the tools that we're able to then, how do I think about this, and how do I invite the Holy Spirit into my thinking, so that as I move through it, I know that I'm taking the steps that will bring me freedom and joy, love and peace, and have me totally lined up with God's will for my life. And it's not a struggle. It becomes a freedom exercise.
So many people listening today have never taken the time to give themselves permission to have a mission statement, a vision statement. And as they're already into retirement and they're like, I already got started. I can't go back and fix what I've already done. But we can look at life today and go, okay, what's the Lord have for me today? It's this whole having some quiet time. And often I find that retirees get so busy they can't even imagine how they could ever even have had a job in the past. But it's that slowing down and letting the Lord speak into their lives, speaking into my life, into your life, that's so important, Bruce. I love how Charting the Course lays all this up. Thank you for putting that resource out there, and thanks for being on iRetire4Him today.
It's good to be with you today, and in continuing podcasts as we grow the Retirement Reformation. We ask each one of our listeners to join us and be part of the Retirement Reformation.
You've been listening to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg, and of course, Retirement Reformation's only Bruce Bruinsma. We're Christ followers pursuing purpose in our retirement, so ultimately, I retire for Him.
Thanks for listening to iRetire4Him with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg and Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma. iRetire4Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.